Now that we have Gian already here prepared, Gian, hello. Um, Maybe we can start already like with the tech talk from Replit. To come into the stage, because this is kind of like a community setup, Gian, you have to go into the top right area of the Discord, and then there's a hand. You can, there you go. So now you can unmute yourself.
Hey.
Yay! Thank you for joining us, Gian. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you. How's it going over there? Thank you for having me.
Just checking on with the voice. I'm not hearing you really well, so let me know if there's anybody else in the audience that hears some issues.
Can
or
you hear me better now?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had the external mic. Now I'm using the headphones. Nice. Yeah, I can start if you want and just go over a bit of like what Replit is, my experience, and then we can probably chat a bit about technical challenges and what's ahead for AI, basically. For what I can tell is the trend going forward. I can share my screen, but I haven't really prepared like slides per se. It's more like a collection of websites. Can you see my screen? Just a quick pulse check. Okay, cool. Yeah, Replit is, as you can see from this screen sharing, is basically a cloud-based IDE. That's like the tagline, but it's much more than that, because essentially you can run and deploy your code in the cloud, which is quite a different paradigm than your usual IDE, like let's say VS Code. Usually your code is sitting on your machine, you have to configure it, and to ship it, you have to pick a hosting provider and basically deploy your code. Say, I don't know, DigitalOcean, AWS, Heroku, whatever it is. Replit is trying to cover the entire stack from idea to production. And our mission is to make this process from idea to production the shortest possible. So, like, as you can see, this is like just a test project of a Next.js web app, and I can run it, and I can see it here, and I can also deploy it. Now, it is already kind of deployed here, like to a certain extent. This is already like a de facto deployment, this REPL.co. But this is essentially like a testing domain. If you want to have your own domain for your own API service, whatever it is, we have our own deployment solution that we just recently released. Among the things that Replit can do, a couple of notable mentions. The first is that basically it can run virtually any code. Any code that can be virtualized in a Nix VM, essentially, which is quite different from your usual like REPL tooling that you can find online. Usually, it's either local JavaScript or Python specifically, but we have this virtualization tool based on Nix that allows us to basically cover most of programming languages and environments. The second thing that is worth calling out, which is actually the topic of this chat, is our AI. And it's like the tag name is Ghostwriter. I have it here. Ghostwriter is really a combination of multiple features under the same umbrella of like a marketing tagline. As it started, it is a code complete tool like this one right here. So you may have seen Copilot, for instance. That is like the classical example. GitHub Copilot, they were the first trying to do that very successfully, to be honest. And Ghostwriter is essentially trying to do the same thing, and in my opinion, quite better. And we can get back to why we're doing it better in a moment. But just for now, yeah, Ghostwriter is code completion. Then we have Ghostwriter Chat. And Ghostwriter Chat is really, an umbrella under which many things are. And here in like the marketing landing page, they are covered, all of them. But I don't know if I can. It's kind of hard here to make an XJS crash. But essentially, every time I try to run some code and it crashes, I can essentially have Ghostwriter debug it for me. I don't know. I can do, for instance, OpenAI complete something, and this will not work, obviously. And I can ask Ghostwriter to tell me what the problem is. And of course, it's because I'm not importing it. This is easy. Just an example, but like I can ask it to generate for me a hello world using GPT-4 OpenAI Python package. Will essentially create a scaffold for what I just asked. There we go, and I can insert it, and I'm good to go now. I don't have an API key right here, but I can add it as a secret. There we go, and I could add a secret as an OpenAI key, and so on and so forth. So that's basically, and you can do many other things like code transform, code explanation, a bunch of other stuff, but ultimately it's like, again, an umbrella term on which we have our AI suite. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what we do. To be really honest, it's, again, much more than that, because if I go back to the homepage, this was the thing that I just showed you is a workspace, but we have a bunch of other features like bounties, the community page, a bunch of stuff. But yeah, like the meat, the true value is here. Now, this is like, to me, a clear example of an AI product, let's call it that way for a moment, that is working because it's generating value. It is creating actual value that can be monetized. And this is not a given, because AI as a term is being thrown around a lot these days, and it's kind of to determine what is hype and bullshit and what is actually, valuable things going on. Like, for instance, you may have seen this chart from a few days ago that shows how ChatGPT, which is like the quintessential use case for LLMs right now, is really slowing down. And there are many reasons, at least like supposedly, of why this is happening. Some people observed like this. This is Minecraft, the red line, and the blue line is ChatGPT. So essentially, people say, hey, the summer started, people like students no longer need ChatGPT. And so this is very seasonal business tied to the education ups and downs, basically. This may or may not be true. Maybe ChatGPT finished its like hype and it's slowing down. A clear like extent is also the fact that plugins flopped, and for like 3-4 weeks last year, no, it was this year. Yeah, I mean, some time ago, for like 3-4 weeks, everyone was saying, hey, plugins will kill the internet, and then it didn't. So it's very hard to determine what is like hype from what is actual value. But one truth is definitely there, and that's the fact that some applications are valuable. People are paying for Replit. People are paying for Copilot. I started using it 2 years ago. It was the summer of 2021 when they first released Copilot in beta, and I got access to GPT-3 at the time, and it was like incredible. The kind of things that you can do. I think like the number is 30% faster in terms of like keystrokes saved with like code complete just alone. Me personally, I do double the work right now in half the time just with like AI-driven tooling for coding. So it is creating actual economic value, which is the exact opposite of a bubble, right? Because a Ponzi scheme, ultimately a bubble, is prices are going up with no actual economic value increasing and being generated. In this case, some pockets of innovation are generating value and people are paying for improving their efficiency. So that's truth, but at the same time, there's also a lot of hype going around. So it's kind of hard to determine what's what. To me, the way I think about it is that many industries will be disrupted. In particular, in my mind, the education market and the legal market, like lawyers, for instance. Another example I have here that I want to show you is I gave to Claude AI this PDF. It's a 90 pages PDF with a class action brought to Google. It's from a couple of days ago, I think. And I literally just asked the LLM, hey, can you summarize the complaint? Can you tell me what this is about? And it told me, like, it took a few minutes to digest the entire page, like the entire PDF, but it did. And then I asked it, hey, can you make like an assessment of risks, timelines, outcomes? And it did. And I double checked this output with a lawyer friend of mine, and they gave me the exact same answer. They told me more in the ballpark of 8 years. Claude said 4-6 years, but you ask different lawyers different opinions, and will probably give you different like take. So this is not like, to me, proof that this is not working. This is to me proof that the legal market is going to be disrupted super hard, but it's going to take time. Like the internet, when it started, it started in the 90s, but like e-commerce really took off like in the mid 90s. It took like 3, 4, 5 years. And we had a bunch of innovations that made that possible. For instance, the biggest one to me is TSL, like the ability to send like credit card information over the wire without anyone really being able to snoop, because HTTPS could protect you. Similarly, right now, we have some limitations that need to be addressed in the LLM tooling. Two that comes to mind: first, context window, and two, they hallucinate. The context window is essentially the number of information that you can ask the LLM to digest before being able to get a reply. LLMs are very trivial. They are black boxes. They are stupidly simple. Also, from an architectural standpoint, like this is not like a secret sauce of any kind. We know how GPT-4 was trained. We know how the GPT architecture in general is made. It's essentially an autocomplete on steroids. Now, of course, the more stuff you type before asking the LLM to complete the rest, the better quality of the output you will have. But right now, there are like some serious limitations to the amount of information you can stuff, basically the context, before being able to get a reply. I think GPT-4 is 8120, something along those lines, which is like a fairly big like repo, for instance, if you are talking about code, but it's not like huge. Like Replit, the entire Replit code base could never fit in that kind of context window. So asking GPT, in this case, let's say, or any other tooling like Claude or your own LLM that you trained to summarize the entire code base, you cannot do that, because there's no way you can feed the entire content of the repo inside just one prompt. You can find ways to fix it. There are multiple techniques to get around that limitation, but it's not easy to get a very precise output. Therefore, that is a serious limitation that right now people are working towards trying to fix it. The second is that LLMs are unruly. They are really hard to control. And so you have stuff like this, like ChatGPT really making stuff up. And again, lawyers, because that's a great example, just trusting the thing, going to court, and the judge fining them because, they just brought a case that was not existent. So, and it's super hard to vet the quality of these tools because, it's you would need manual labor to do that, which is the exact problems that these models are trying to solve. Lack of white collar intelligent work at scale fast. So these are like the two big things that right now the industry, in my opinion, is working towards. But this is totally just in the realm of like researchers and big companies. Like I think 2-3 of them out there trying to solve these issues, like Anthropic, Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft through OpenAI, and maybe a couple of others. But like these are like the companies that are really trying to solve these problems. All the rest are settling on two, let's say, downstream elements of using LLMs. One, wrapping a product around OpenAI. This is basically what is going on. I mean, Anthropic and Claude to a certain extent, but mostly OpenAI. And that's basically it. And building products out of that single API. And two, building your own LLM and trying to train your own LLM given what we know today about LLMs. And the reason why some companies do that, and Replit is one of them actually, the code complete that I showed you is a model that we trained on our own. So it's our own LLM that we made open source actually, and you can look it up. I think it's called Replit 3B because it's a 3 billion parameters model. And the reason why that you kind of need that is that this is really all it takes to write an AI product using OpenAI. It's one single method from one single package. It has zero mode. Everyone can copy it. There's no defensibility. So either you are in a winner-take-all business where you have very strong network effects and you can like control the access to your product through something else, or you have to train your own model in order to have some kind of advantage over the competition that cannot copy you. And the mode is really just data. Because to train an LLM, you need three things: an architecture. And again, as I said before, architectures are known. We know how GPT works. So this is not like a secret. Two, you need money. And for a venture-backed company, it is not an absurd amount of money. For individuals and indie hackers is completely not accessible as a sum. Like we're talking in the realm of like, I don't know, $100,000, something along those lines as a starter, which is not for a VC-backed company, although it's definitely a serious investment, but it's not accessible for like single individuals or small teams. But this is not like truly a defensibility mode because anyone can raise money. In the AI market today, this is especially true. And therefore, it all falls down to the third component, that is data. If you have better data to train these models, you can have better performance. And this goes back to what I was saying before. Our code complete here model that I was showing you, okay, sure, has been tested at scale and has been proven to be better than Copilot. Why? Because we fine-tuned our own model based on our own data and controlling the entire stack, the entire thing, top to bottom. We managed to get a better performance essentially. And in this case, we are able to compete against OpenAI head to head. But it is the only reason why we can do that is because we have better data. So that's ultimately what I think the market will go towards, like companies that have better data for some reason and that can train better models through the tooling that currently exists. Like for instance, Mosaic has been recently acquired by Databricks, and they are, there you go, for like 1.3 billion, I think. There we go. Yes. Just 62 employees. It's crazy. And I met some of them. They're incredibly good. And they allow you to train your own LLM. It's not like again, it's rocket science. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not like so hard that you can only need to be OpenAI to do that. So I think that the industry is going there, but there are some serious limitations that we need to address, like again, context window and hallucinations. But I'm super excited to see what the future will give us. So that's all I had. I'm happy to chat about this if you want to. I hope this is what you had in mind when you asked me to present some stuff here.
Hey, thank you. That was super cool. I'm curious about one thing. Why would you not make a plugin for VS Code and go for the web ID?
What would the plugin do?
Everything that the web ID does.
you cannot do many things with the plugging IDE, the plugging of for VS Code. One of them in particular is, controlling the entire stack. Like we have access to the entire thing, shell, every single letter being typed in the editor. We can tweak to the most basic level every single thing that makes an IDE an IDE. Doing that inside a plugin is a growth hack, essentially, but it doesn't really give you the kind of control that we have from a technical perspective. So I don't think that it will ever happen. It's not really up to me, honestly. Right? I mean, it's not like I am the founder, but at the same time, I've talked with him about this a few times, and yeah, this is not something that we are interested in doing at all, because it will essentially mean giving up control to Microsoft, really.
Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks so much. That was really interesting. Really great. I just had a question more on, I guess, what direction you think AI is going to go. And by that, I mean, do you think the models going forward are going to be more general, like something like OpenAI's model, where it can kind of do a lot of things, but maybe not so well? Or do you have any thoughts on topic-specific AIs? Like I'm working with somebody that's trying to develop like a tax and accounting specific AI model. So I guess what direction do you think it's going to end up going?
I think definitely the latter that you mentioned. Like I think based on the conversations I've seen, I've had, especially Mosaic folks, which needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because this is exactly their business model. So they're kind of like biased to a certain degree. But I've seen the kind of things that they are doing, and my personal opinion, which is again just an opinion, but my personal opinion is that we are going towards a future where we have very, very large open source basic models, and different companies will fine tune those models with their own data, proprietary data, that they will not release and will not be available like in the public internet, in order not to give an edge to, let's say, OpenAI. And that will be essentially the way we're going to achieve better performance in single vertical domains. That's to a certain extent what we are doing as well, like as Replit. We trained our own model. Actually, we didn't fine tune it. We literally trained the entire thing top to bottom. But I think that moving forward, it's going to be much easier to just take an off-the-shelf general model, open source, and fine tune it with your own like secret sauce of data. Like in your case, I don't know, a bunch of accountants and lawyers getting together, crafting very high quality data and fine tuning the model with that data, and then releasing it, and it will be necessarily better than OpenAI, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And Intuit, which does like TurboTax and QuickBooks, they're kind of already doing that because they have like billions of data points. They just look at your books, right? And so they're definitely doing something in the background. So curious to see what that's going to look like.
Yeah, Intuit is a great example. Another good one that comes to mind is Bloomberg, right? So they trained their own model based on their own data, and they've been doing this job for like what, 40 years. So they have like the kind of data that no one really has in the world. And I imagine OpenAI with a plugin being better than a raw model trained on that data from the get-go. That to me is my intuition and what I've seen so far. But yeah, let's see. Let's see how that goes.
Makes sense. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and thank you, Gian. That was like really helpful and super insightful presentation. Are there any more questions from our members of the audience? As I told before, you can raise a hand in the top right space of the Discord, and feel free to ask the questions. Otherwise, like I'm going to go ahead, Gian, with it's kind of like node code question for have like tech background as well. You were talking about and comparing kind of like Replit with ChatGPT and kind of like the difference between those in terms of the context window that they have respectively. So I wanted to ask you, like, for a no coding person, and maybe like you're biased here, but ChatGPT also like knows to code, right? And you can
Yeah.
even kind of like code smart contracts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How, like, what's the difference for a no coding person? Like, I don't know, like if they go like ChatGPT is like super intuitive, straightforward, and kind of like just
Yeah.
the dashboard of Replit. It's kind of like, well, you have to know something about coding,
Yeah.
right? So what do you think are like the difference about of like this a person that it's not, you know, tech related can leverage Replit, for example?
Yeah. No, that is a great question. And to me, so let me put it this way. We currently use a very similar technology to the one powering ChatGPT for like specifically the chatbot. So it shouldn't be the case that they output a vastly different result to like Ghostwriter, let's say. The biggest problem is, the fact that people are used to ChatGPT and they're not used to Replit. So that makes a lot of sense that, people may go to, let's say, ChatGPT or Bard to generate like the first portion of their code and kind of like get started. Like, for instance, why we don't think this is actually a problem, but this is actually a cool thing. I have Bard here, and I can ask Bard generate a hello world in Python. And let's see, there we go. We have export to Replit here because we have a partnership with Bard that launched actually today, this morning. So this is very timely. And this is going to, open Replit and you get to run your code. Now, where I think we have an edge over, there we go, yeah, over like ChatGPT, let's say, or Bard, is that you need to run the code. And sure, now ChatGPT has code interpreter, but first, code interpreter, and two, you still have to edit the thing. Like you cannot expect, even as a no-code person, to not tweak the code that these LLMs are outputting, because sometimes they are not outputting something that is really working. So I have another example here, and this one right here, I tried it before. I'm not gonna do it now, but like this is not running. It has a bug. So if you try to run it, it's not gonna work. And you go through then a very iterative process of back and forth with like the chat trying to fix it and so on. And for that, you kind of need to have a working development environment. And especially if you are a no-code person, that development environment is most likely not going to be your local environment because you don't have like VS Code installed, you don't have a shell that is not configured, maybe you don't even have Python installed, all the dependencies, packages, and whatnot. We take care of the whole thing, basically sitting on below the chat surface that is generating code. And the second thing is that the Ghostwriter feature that we have is seeded with the whole context of the entire project. And therefore, we can output a reply that is more in line with what the code of the entire project is about, instead of like your conversation history that may or may not be up to date, again, going back to the context window. So to me, actually, it's the contrary. I feel like Replit is the perfect tool to develop, let's say, as a, I wouldn't say no code, because you still need to code, but that's like, you need it anyway if you want to build some kind of product. It's more like tech savvy people that are not really coders, but can understand a bit of this and a bit of that and can like stitch together things. It's the perfect tool, like to prototype stuff and launch them very quickly and have something working. I don't think OpenAI will like get to the point of competing with us there. Code interpreter is a nice gimmick, but it doesn't get to the depth that we have here. So yeah, actually, to me it's very complementary as a tool. It is very together they work very well. Let me put it this way.
Yeah, gotcha. Like now I understand the difference. Thank you. That was like very straight to the point. And I also have like a following up question, not related to no code, but more into kind of like our ecosystem, like how Web3 can leverage tools like Replit, for example, or how we can integrate maybe it's like API. So I don't know, like we have some coders here that better could know than I, but how we can, like just leverage this technology to also like integrate it with what is happening and what we can do with Web3.
Yeah. I feel like just off the top of my head, I haven't thought very deeply about this. So this is like just again off the top of my head, but I would say I would have two points to say. The first is about Replit, and the second is more in general, like a general point. About Replit, I think that Replit today is a very good tool to prototype things. I don't think no one really thinks that it is ready to like have very complex production apps serving users with very complex use cases. I wouldn't be particularly comfortable like having very heavy production apps. But today, this is not really the purpose of the product. The product is meant to basically help people to go from idea to having something that can work and can be used by users in the quickest amount of time. And therefore, I would say that, to me, I think that if you have like an idea that you want to like prototype and sketch, and you want to put it in front of users in the quickest amount of time, that is the perfect time to have Replit, because you just open a new project, you put something together, you immediately have a working website that you can share with, like, for instance, a client when you're still trying to figure out the specifics and requirements of a project. That is like a perfect use case. And I know of many teams and freelancers and hackers that are using Replit for that. So if you're like in the very early stages of a project, still like in the ideation phase, I think like that's where Replit shines. And then you can like move to more complex platforms and have your own IDE with your own shell and your own hosting that you can control and fine tune. That's perfectly fine to me. And actually, that's, I would say, what you're supposed to do, at least right now. In the future, we're working very hard to become the place where you can like host very complex products. But that probably is not the case today. The second thing I would mention, more like in general, about Web3. One of the things that I've noticed over the course of the years is that one of the hardest part of working on smart contracts and like crypto as like a tool that moves money and has very real world consequences is the whole security part, right? Making sure that there are no bugs, no vulnerabilities that can be exploited. And the history is filled with examples of very, very expensive and costly mistakes. The thing where I think LLMs are very good at right now is debugging and vulnerability, let's say, testing. Now, it doesn't really mean that they will replace security researchers. On the contrary, to me, they're a tool that security researchers can use to be faster at finding things that they missed. So in my mind, on top of the things that every developer can benefit from in terms of AI tooling, which is faster code, faster prototyping, faster code completion, working in general more efficiently. On top of that, I think there's an argument to be made, mostly around security, that Web3 can potentially benefit from. And I think there are some companies out there, some startups and young teams that are trying to work there. And I think they will make a very successful they're very successful products because I think the need is real.
100% agree with you. Yep. Any more questions to Gian from the audience? Okay, so I guess we can wrap it up here. Thank you, Gian, for joining us. It was great to catch up with where you are doing at Replit, kind of like know more about the product and see how we can leverage it as well.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, of course.